Most people remember Robert Urich as the rugged, unshakable star of Vega $sign and Spencer. For Hire, the man who always looked like he had everything under control. On screen, he was the ultimate tough guy, fearless, charismatic, and ready to take on any villain. But what most fans never knew was that behind the Hollywood lights, Robert was fighting a battle far more dangerous than anything scripted for TV. And standing beside him, through every twist and turn, was his wife, actress Heather Menzies. Their story is one of love, resilience, heartbreak, and a legacy that still inspires today. And just when you think you know how this story ends, the truth will break your heart even more. Stay with me, because this is the story of Robert Urich and Heather Menzies, a couple who faced Hollywood, cancer, and tragedy together, and left behind a legacy that will never fade. Robert Urich's journey didn't begin in the bright lights of Las Vegas. It started in the small town of Toronto, Ohio, where he was raised in a hardworking family with Rusin and Slovak roots. He was an athlete, a leader, and someone who seemed destined for greatness, even before Hollywood came calling. At Florida State University, he earned a football scholarship and even shared the field with Burt Reynolds, who would later play a crucial role in his career. But Robert's true talent wasn't in football. It was in his voice, his presence, and his ability to connect. He studied communications, earned a master's degree, and even worked at WGN-TV in Chicago before being fired for one shocking reason. He was secretly moonlighting as an aspiring actor. That setback didn't stop him. It lit the fire that pushed him toward Los Angeles, where everything was about to change. Robert's first real break came in the early 1970s with small roles in TV and film, including Magnum Force alongside Clint Eastwood. But the moment that truly made him a star came thanks once again to Burt Reynolds, who convinced powerhouse producer Aaron Spelling to give Robert a shot. That chance turned into SWAT, where Robert played Officer Jim Street, and almost overnight, he became one of TV's most recognizable faces. From SWAT to Soap to Tabitha, he was everywhere. And then came the role that cemented him as a household name, Dan Tana in Vega $. With his sharp suits, fast cars, and that larger-than-life presence, Robert embodied everything fans loved about the neon-soaked crime dramas of the late 70s. 2 Golden Globe nominations later, he was no longer just an actor, he was a television icon. But here's the twist. While millions saw a star who had it all, Robert's personal journey was anything but easy. Through the 80s and 90s, Robert kept building his career. He took on Spencer, For Hire, hosted National Geographic Explorer, and delivered one of his most praised performances in Lonesome Dove. He even stepped onto Broadway in Chicago, and later starred in The Love Boat, The Next Wave. To fans, he seemed unstoppable. But in 1996, everything changed. Robert was diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, a rare and aggressive cancer. For most people, that diagnosis would have been the end of their career. But Robert, he refused to let it define him. Even while undergoing brutal treatments, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, he continued to work, to perform, and to inspire. He became a national spokesperson for the American Cancer Society and co-founded the Urich Fund for Cancer Research with Heather. He even donated his Who Wants to Be a Millionaire winnings, $125,000, directly to cancer research. But perhaps the most powerful part of his fight wasn't what he did on camera. It was the example he set for his family and for millions of people watching his battle. Robert and Heather's love story was just as remarkable. The two met in 1974 while filming a commercial where they played a bride and groom. Life imitated art, and they married a year later. For nearly 3 decades, Heather was his rock, and together they adopted 3 children, Ryan, Emily, and Allison. Heather herself was no stranger to the spotlight. At just 14 years old, she starred as Louisa Von Trapp in The Sound of Music, rescuing little Gretel during that unforgettable rowboat scene. Later, she built a career across television, film, and even sci-fi cult classics like Logan's Run. But more than an actress, Heather was Robert's partner in every sense. She stood by him through his cancer battle, through his lawsuit against the studio that abandoned him after his diagnosis, and through every stage of his career. Together, they turned their personal pain into purpose, fighting for cancer awareness and research long after Robert's health began to fade. In April 2002, after 6 relentless years of fighting cancer, Robert Urich passed away at just 55 years old. Heather and their 3 children were by his side. His ashes were laid to rest in Prince Edward County, Ontario, a quiet resting place for a man who had once lived in the glare of Hollywood's brightest lights. But heartbreak didn't stop there. Heather carried on Robert's mission for years, championing cancer research and keeping his legacy alive. Yet in 2017, tragedy struck again. Heather was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and just weeks later, on Christmas Eve, she passed away at the age of 68. The love story that had inspired so many ended in sorrow, but not without leaving behind something powerful: their children, their foundation, and a legacy of courage, resilience, and love. Today, Robert and Heather's children carry their parents' mission forward. Their son Ryan became a doctor, specializing in infectious diseases, his career inspired by the helplessness he felt watching his father fight cancer. Emily became an emergency room nurse, following that same path of compassion, and Allison continues to honor her parents by living a life shaped by their values. Through them, through the Urich Foundation, and through the countless lives touched by their advocacy, Robert and Heather's story lives on. And then there's the contrast. Robert's lifelong friend, Burt Reynolds, who first encouraged him to move to Hollywood, faced his own battles, but of a very different kind. While Robert lived quietly with his family, Reynolds' personal life was often splashed across tabloids. Failed marriages, public scandals, and financial ruin. Their friendship highlighted a striking difference: one man whose legacy was built on love and dignity, and another whose brilliance was often overshadowed by personal chaos. It's a reminder that fame doesn't always define greatness. Character does. Robert Urich may have left us too soon, but his impact on television, on his family, and on the fight against cancer remains unforgettable. So let me ask you, do you think Robert Urich's legacy has been overlooked compared to other TV legends of his time? And what do you remember most about him? His roles on screen, or his incredible strength off screen? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories of the stars who touched our lives in ways we'll never forget. Because sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones we never see on screen.